Then from there, I discovered, okay, there's two other pillars. Now that is a foundation that you've laid it, and if we were to put the pillars in this fashion, on one side you have the pillar of righteousness, and on the other side you have the pillar of justice. Now, again, I struggled with the meanings of those words. What does righteousness mean? It seems a generic term that anyone can use and anyone can apply as they wish, and we've heard people call this is a righteous man. And again, I went back to Dr. Bruce Waltke again for the definition of righteousness. Now, this was in a comprehensive study of the book of Proverbs, because a lot of these principles are encapsulated in the book of Proverbs, and that was the main point at which I went and I extracted these principles from, in addition to now having seen how these principles work out in terms of how they play out. And this is the benefit to me of the book of the Old Testament, especially the book of Kings and Chronicles, which tell the stories of the people who did these things, or didn't do them for that matter, who disobeyed God, and how things ended up. I love it that it gives you the whole chain of action. It gives you what in legal terms is called the causal link, the link between what a person did and the outcome. Who did what, and this is the outcome that happened. And I love it because the Old Testament gives you a picture over hundreds of years about how human strategy and human actions come to an end. So Waltke describes righteousness as this: disadvantaging yourself to advantage others. And again, that sounds simplistic, but think about it. Disadvantaging yourself to advantage others. Putting yourself at a disadvantage that others may benefit. And just let's think about that for a little while. From a leadership perspective, and I'm talking now as a man, and I'm talking as a man operating in a season where, right now as we speak, there's this masculinity movement going around that emphasizes on men, tells men, you need to take care of yourselves first, don't care about anyone else. You know, mwanaume ni pesa. Ukiwa na pesa kila kitu ingine itafanyika. It makes sense from a worldly perspective. But think about that as a husband for myself and as a father, disadvantaging myself, foregoing what would bring me pleasure, what would bring me prestige, what would bring me joy for now, to advantage others, to advantage my wife, to advantage my children. And that, in essence, is righteousness. And from a leadership perspective, disadvantaging myself, not taking advantage of a position that I hold. Now, I come from a Kamba community, and there's a very interesting saying that, and I question it, because a lot of this also went back to studying the Kamba culture and the Kamba proverbs. And there's one particular proverb that goes like this: Kilau ni kisa wake mutwe. A loose translation to this would be an opportunity. You make use of an opportunity best when you're occupying. So you make the most of an office when you're occupied. Now, what does that, in essence, what is it saying? Especially in this context. It says this: that for as long as you occupy an office, private or public, it is your duty and obligation to take advantage of opportunities that office offers to the best of your ability, which means that you make as much as you can from that opportunity. And to an extent, it reflects and is the cause of a lot of the challenges that we're seeing right now, in the sense that I remember when I was a young boy, I was a student, and I remember there was a minister in the office of the president. His name was Robert Matano, who happened to be fired. At that time, the government was fairly brutal in the sense that your firing could be announced over radio, and there's nothing that would happen. And when he was fired, and I remember because he lived close to where we lived, we laughed. And I'm saying we because I was there. And some of you people who think children are angels, children are not angels. Let me remind you, it's nothing like that. There's no angel in a child when are born sinners from the very beginning. And we laughed because the laughter was that Robert Matano requested the government for a lorry to ferry his things from where he lived in Nairobi to Kilifi, I think, or Taita Taveta, where he came from. And we laughed at that statement because in our minds and in our hearts, and remember, I'm a child, the thought was, why would you, you're a government minister, why wouldn't you have the means by which to take your own things back to your home? But the reality is that Robert Matano was an ethical individual, and all the other things aside, that he didn't believe that being a minister, being a member of parliament, was for the purpose of making him rich. And that passed me by. And I'm saying this because I find ourselves in that situation right now where you disadvantage, you're not willing to disadvantage yourself to advantage others. And unrighteousness is disadvantaging others to advantage yourself. And that's a contrast. Unrighteousness is not evil per se. The way I thought of it is in the sense that you think unrighteousness is just doing evil by itself. It's disadvantaging others to advantage yourself. And that for me was huge. Because it means that you can... Righteousness is a very conscious thing. Both of them are very conscious things that you're doing. The difference between righteousness and unrighteousness. And then now we come to justice. This other hand, which is the other pillar upon which you lay upon the fear of God. And again, we came to the definition of what is justice. And justice is giving people what is due to them, on the one hand. And on the other hand, not giving people what is not due to them. And I tell you, I think one of the things that I want to recommend for those of you who, let me plug in International Leadership University here, that study is a good thing. Just committing yourself to study is a very good thing, because studying opens your mind to things like this. And I remember this, and I know this because now I was doing those doctoral studies of mine in my 40s. And I'd never come across definitions like this. And you can come to accept these definitions that everyone else gives you, a dictionary definition of something, and you accept that to be the gospel truth. Then you discover there are other things that both simplify and complicate your life. So you have justice as giving people what is due to them. That if this phone belongs to my brother here, then it ought to be given to him. But at the same time, if this device does not belong to him, then it ought not to be given to him by right. And we have that conflation where right now what we have, the injustice, is when you do not give people what is due to them. You deny people what is inherently theirs. You deny people what is their right. On the other hand, then you give people things that are not due to them. You have property that doesn't belong to them, it belongs to the government, and someone takes it for themselves or gives it to people who they are close to. Now that is injustice. Why are those so close to the fear of God? Because these are the two primary things that, when you look at someone like David, it says David was a man after God's own heart. And if you think about that, a man after God's own heart, nobody else is described in the Bible like that. David was a man after God's own heart. David pleased God. But when David sinned with Bathsheba, he committed both an act of unrighteousness, which is he disadvantaged others, in this case to Uriah, to advantage himself, David, by taking his wife. But at the same time, it was also an act of injustice. And these are the things that made God so angry. I'd always wondered, adulterers were so many in the Bible. There's so many adulterers who committed adultery in far worse ways than this one. But this particular one, because of how much God loved David, this really, really annoyed God and made him angry. And that's why, in my view, that punishment was so severe. And in essence comes to you today. In terms of that, the sword will never leave this house of David. You can imagine that. In addition to the kinds of problems, because when you look at the tragedies that David's house went through as a result of that. So these are the things that we must be very careful about. Number one, just the fear of God, knowing that God is who he says he is, and what he says he means, and what he means he says. Then righteousness, that we must be righteous and not unrighteous, at disadvantaging ourselves to advantage others, even though when those others are our customers. And then justice, that giving people what is due to them and not giving them what is not due to them. So when you come to that, then you come to the place of essence of now, how do you actualize these things? So I came now and I realized there are three things that, two other things. We come to the next layer.